Michael Hart, MD, is the medical director and founder at Ready to Go Clinic in London, Ontario. Ready to Go Clinic focuses on cannabinoid medicine, but also offers family medicine services and specialized hormone testing. Dr. Hart is a recognized speaker on the topic of cannabis. He has spoken at continuing medical education events throughout Ontario, multiple cannabis conferences, and has been featured on a variety of cannabis websites. Wow, I love it. Right in my wheelhouse, all of it. I don't even know where to begin, but welcome, Dr. Mike. I appreciate you coming on. I am going to call you Mike throughout the show because I don't know if it seems a little weird to keep calling you doctor, even though I respect that and love what you're doing within the practice, because there needs to be more doctors like you. Welcome to the show. This is one of the first episodes of Cote Culture. I appreciate you coming on and speaking your truth and sharing your wisdom with everybody.
Well, I'm super happy to be here, Riley. And you know what? We've already met in person, so of course you can call me Mike.
Yeah.
And go ahead and ask me whatever questions that you and your audience want to hear, and I'd be happy to do my best to answer them.
What I think I appreciate about you the most is that you're so well-rounded in your quest of healing people, and you're not you're pigeonholed into a certain way of thinking. I think you're very alternative. I think you're progressive. I think you cover everything that the direction that it's going in, starting with cannabinoid therapy and cannabinoid medicine within your practice, which is it's ancient as the earth, but it seems to be progressive thinking in this day and age. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about your practice in London, Ontario, and how you're using cannabinoids to treat an array of illnesses, conditions, and diseases.
Sure. So I started my own clinic just over 3 years ago now, called Ready to Go Clinic in London, Ontario, in Canada. And as you alluded to earlier, we primarily do cannabis therapy there, but we do some basic family medicine stuff, hormone testing, and some ketamine treatments, which we can probably chat about as well. But when it comes to cannabis, I mean, for me, like when I started practicing, 2013 and 2014 was when I started. I saw a lot of patients at that time who were using opioids. They're using a lot of sleeping pills, using a lot of benzodiazepines, so things like Xanax, Ativan, clonazepam. So, I knew that, there was definitely an alternative with cannabis. And luckily in Canada in 2014, they introduced this new program, the MMPR program, that basically just made it much easier for physicians to prescribe cannabis.
Right.
So, since that time, it's been, my quest to get patients off of, harmful drugs like opiates, like some sleep aids that can be really harmful, like benzodiazepines. And as you can probably attest to as well, using cannabis over the drugs that I just mentioned oftentimes does lead to a better overall quality of life and better overall treatment for the patient. So, I'm very pleased with the decision I made back then, and I'm going to continue my quest to try and get patients off of those medicines onto cannabis and onto a better lifestyle as well.
Right, that's beautiful, because God knows we're self-destructing as a species, and a lot of it has to do with just our consciousness and the level of it, and how we're healing and being mindful of the things that actually impact our health. And I think cannabinoids are far superior to all these things you're talking about. I think the challenge is, once you get them transitioned, is to get them to do the work now, right? It's cannabis is a medicine and it's a tool, but there has to be some work on the patient's end to maybe get to the root cause of some of these things, and be healthier all rounded, because you're integrating this into a wellness regime, and not just looking at this as a masking tape like they're using the pharmaceuticals already with. So building off that, the opioid crisis is run rampant. It doesn't discriminate. You're seeing a lot of positive results with either integrating them together to get them off the opioid itself, or using the cannabis as a tool to manage the withdrawal, or a combination of them too. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing with the transition from opioids to cannabinoids and the success rate in your practice.
Sure. So, that is definitely, one of the things that I try to do in my practice to get people off opiates and onto cannabis. And just before I get into that, let's just chat maybe a little bit about why. So we know that opioids, for example, kill more people than all illegal drugs
Right.
combined,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we know that they're extremely harmful. But not only that, but meaning that they can kill you, but also too they can really wreck your quality of life,
Sure.
because a lot of people don't realize that they really kill your testosterone levels.
Mm-hmm.
And when your testosterone level dips, your motivation dips, your energy dips. You're just not going to feel as well. So it's not just the reason that they kill you. They can also really affect your overall quality of life. So I think it's important for people to know that. As you've probably said to your listeners before, Riley, cannabis on its own has never killed anyone. So meaning the lethal dosage of cannabis can't kill it. Has someone taken cannabis and jumped off a cliff, maybe. But again,
Right.
like we're talking about the lethal
Right.
dose here. So, that being said, given that knowledge, it's almost to me just like a no-brainer to try to use cannabis over opioids.
Right.
Um, and for the most part, yes, like things have been largely successful in my practice. Like a lot of people have been able to completely eliminate their opioid use with cannabis. And if they have been able to eliminate it, they've been able to reduce it.
Right.
And there might be some people who have been in a very, very severe car accident, or something where they're just in an extreme amount of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And to those people who say that they still need the opiates, I say I understand, but just use the least amount that you possibly can,
Yeah.
and try to maximize the other medicines such as cannabis. Because just talking a little bit about opiates and how you die from opiates, so it actually causes respiratory depression, which is completely dose dependent.
Mm.
So meaning that the more opioids you take, the more likely you are to cause respiratory depression. So, if you can just reduce someone's use of opioids, then that can be therapeutic in itself as well. Of course, the biggest win is always when you can completely eliminate opioids. But for sure, even just a reduction is definitely still, a win in my opinion, and can really help the overall patient's quality of life.
Yeah, 100%. You said it. It is harm reduction. Exactly what it is. It's keeping people alive long enough with a quality of life long enough to, again, get their hands dirty and get into the work and get into the root cause of most of these problems, like where the pain's coming from. I understand some of these are extreme circumstances, like you're mentioning, like a car accident or, really traumatic events. But a lot of this chronic pain is self-induced. We know that from overeating, refined sugar and, diets of just processed food and salt and whatever else. But, inflammation obviously comes along with, chronic pain. So I think there's always this message that comes, at least when I speak about it, I know you do too, is that when you talk about cannabis, you talk about it in like this, in the sense of holism, that it is, again, it's a very valuable tool, but it can be abused where, people are kind of missing the point of what it's, what it's really there for. And, maybe hanging on to that crutch a little bit longer than they should, because they're just, whether they're just, too anxious to act or, neglect to act, whatever they choose in that situation. But, it's such a great integrative tool. If you are mindful enough to, understand dosing, so precisely that you can kind of be in tune with your body, you can use this, as a tool for workouts and, meditation and, and sleep and anxiety, all these different things, without, crossing that line where, now you sacrifice productivity. But, my point is that it's an amazing tool, but I think it's still misunderstood. And I think you do a really good job at normalizing this, where it's, it's just this super dynamic tool that, that obviously you're talking about opioids, it's very pain management focused, but, once you can kind of get through that and, understand it as medicine, but also understand it as something that can, help you in in a spiritual sense, or in a conscious forming sense. A lot of people that consume cannabis generally drink less alcohol. So there's like a lot of these holistic changes that kind of come along with this plant. Maybe you want to talk about that leading into, maybe just if you've seen a harm reduction, or less of your patients drinking alcohol. That are, between those and opioids, I think are the two most abused drugs, probably, or maybe Ambien thrown in there, probably on the planet. But then, I want to talk about like mental health. Always go back to the PTSD, and you wrote a book on that. Why veterans are actually ditching opioids and probably other pharmaceutical drugs, for cannabis, which is amazing because they're abandoning the VA for God's gift to mankind, which is beautiful in itself, but it's unfortunate. So maybe you want to expand on that, what you've seen with cannabis and alcohol reduction, and just the mental health component mixing in the PTSD with these veterans.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm really happy to talk about that because, I have seen quite a few veterans in my practice, and I've been seeing, vets now for just over 5 years. And so PTSD is a topic that I have researched quite a bit. And yes, I do have a book on it called Friendly Fire, which is available on Amazon. Um, but, when it comes to treating uh, PTSD, what I generally do is I break up symptoms into daytime and the nighttime, and we'll talk about the alcohol in this as well. So, in the daytime, a lot of people have PTSD, and I do want to be clear that, even though I just mentioned veterans, PTSD does affect civilians as
Sure.
well, obviously,
Yep.
right? Like people who have been in, rape victims, sexual abuse,
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of things that can cause PTSD. So it's not just combat from being in the military.
And just
Um,
trauma, right? Some sort of
Trauma,
trauma.
and yeah, trauma in general, and and what trauma does, it generally, always shows the same symptoms in
Mm-hmm.
those patients, no matter whether they were, again, someone had witnessed something really really traumatic as a child, someone either lived through a really rough childhood, whether it was sexual abuse, again, the military, like they all exhibit the same symptoms. So in
Mm-hmm.
the daytime, the biggest thing is that they really don't like leaving their home very much. So one of the questions I always ask, patients who have PTSD is how many days a month are you leaving your home from 0 to 30?
Mm.
And a lot of times, the numbers in the single digits.
Wow, hey, that's crazy.
And some people, it'll be like, 1 or 2 days. Have difficulty getting groceries. Because everything is overstimulated because they're in this hyper vigilant state all the time. So they go to the grocery store, they hear something overhead, they think like it's an alert, like, or they think that it's a command, or it's someone saying something to them,
Mm-hmm.
because they're in danger. So because of that, they're not able to just enjoy the experience. They're always on alert. They're really hyper vigilant, and they can't be present with their family. And that can also cause a lot of issues, not just for the person, but for the people around them
Right.
too, right? Their family. So that happens to a lot of people who have PTSD, and what that is that it really is learned fear. Like no
Sure.
one is born afraid to leave their home. No one is born afraid to go to the grocery store.
Yep.
But through trauma, through life experiences, something happens where people learn to be afraid of these things, and because they've learned to be afraid of these things, what they want to do is they want to avoid them. So they avoid leaving their home. They avoid going to the grocery store because they're literally afraid of it.
Yeah.
And this is where CBD comes into play. So rather, you probably saw the study before that has shown that CBD can actually decrease learned fear.
Yeah.
So that is, I mean, it's a pretty traumatic statement, or sorry, powerful statement. And I've seen the results of my practice. A lot of people who do have PTSD, who have had trouble leaving their home, having trouble going to the grocery store, just having trouble really being social in general. Once they have used some CBD, they have had some success. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect for everybody, but it can help decrease that fear. And then what the patient has to do on their end, because again, CBD is not magic like we've talked about. It's incredible medicine. It can treat so many things, but we're not going to call it magic because it's not.
Right.
But what it can do is it can decrease that fear, and then once you expose yourself, then you can get over those fears. You can build some momentum. So maybe the first time you go to the grocery store, you take some CBD and you go with someone else, and
Right.
maybe if you feel comfortable that time, maybe you can take CBD on and go on your own the next time. And you be careful about what times you're going, because if it's really busy in the night, that's gonna cause a lot more stress. So you
Sure.
just have to do it gradually. So that's one of the big ways that I help a lot of patients who have PTSD in the daytime. Now let's talk about a little bit about the nighttime of PTSD as well. So nighttime, as you said, a lot of people they abuse alcohol to get to sleep. They abuse prescription drugs,
Yep.
and sometimes even unfortunately, they combine the two of them, right? And a lot of people with PTSD, what happens when they go to sleep? They get nightmares, so
Yep.
they're almost afraid to go to sleep. They wake up, they're sweating, they're kicking their spouse, they're just not getting any sleep at all. And then, of course, the next day when they wake up in the morning, they're just completely exhausted. They don't feel rested because they haven't slept. So that's just going to make their anxiety, severely worse the next day.
Right.
It's going to decrease their productivity. I mean, it's just a whole snowball effect that, I don't really even need to explain, because everyone knows what it's like, not to sleep.
Yeah.
But nightmares are something that people with PTSD deal with, and THC can decrease nightmares. So a
Sure.
lot of patients with PTSD do use some THC to help decrease their nightmares at night,
Mm-hmm.
and it has been shown to be very effective in studies online, and also too I've seen it in my practice. So and coming back to that kind of strategy, I'm not saying that you should never use CBD at night, or I'm not saying that you should never use THC in the daytime.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that I generally have two primary goals when I'm seeing someone with PTSD. The first goal is to get them out of the house so they can get some type of function again, so they can
Sure.
get out into society, so they can start talking to people. And then the second thing, like I said, is the sleep. So that's generally my approach to things. But of course, someone might have some neuropathic pain. CBD isn't as good as THC for neuropathic pain. They might need a little bit of THC in the daytime. And you know what? Some people may with PTSD just respond really, really well to CBD only,
Yeah.
and they only use it to sleep at night. I did a poll on my Twitter recently. I think there's only over 1,000 people responded, but still over 1,000 people, and about 15% of people said that they only use CBD to sleep. So for some people, you can use CBD and get away with it. And there was, I know, one pilot study done. It was a case series. There was 11 patients in the study that had PTSD, and they only used CBD, and 10 of them reported like significant improvement. And I believe that one of the improvements was in sleep.
Yeah. I
So,
believe it.
if you have, so the message there is that, if you have PTSD and you're someone who's just still, completely has an aversion to THC, which, I understand, that's okay. CBD can still be an incredible medicine for you.
Yeah. No doubt. I know personally, my experience with cannabis is like I feel like the THC puts you to sleep, and the CBD puts you in this really deep, like hibernation type sleep. And that's just like from my own experience with it. And I've experimented without THC, and then obviously just with THC, no CBD, and that's how I feel. I just feel like I go to sleep like in literally like 20 seconds I'm out, and then
Yeah.
you just go into this different dimension of sleep. And I wanted to ask you about that. So, obviously there's a lot of the positive, mystical component to dreams, right? I mean, there's a fine line between a dream and what you're talking about, a nightmare. When I consume cannabis, I don't dream, but I sleep like a champ, and I wake up feeling fresh. I wake up super early, productive, energy. So can you maybe explain maybe dream state, REM sleep, the lack of dream state and still getting proper sleep? Because
Sure.
I've never really understood this a whole lot, honestly.
Sure. So, before I answer this question, I do want to preface that I am a family doctor. I'm not a sleep doctor, so I'm not an expert on sleep per se. But in terms of cannabis and using it for sleep, again, like that's part of the therapy. Like we just said that, THC decreases nightmares. So, it's going to take away your dreams completely.
Yeah,
Is that a bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing for someone who has, severe PTSD. I think that,
sure.
the benefits there just, completely outweigh the cons.
Yeah,
I think that patients with PTSD would agree with me on that one.
yeah,
The reduction in REM sleep is really minimal. There's Dr. Ethan Russo, said this recently that the reduction in REM sleep with THC is basically non-significant. It exists, but like it's not going to do anything to like affect
yeah.
your overall function or anything.
I
The,
believe
the,
that.
the, yeah, the following day. So, it's not something that we really need to worry about very much overall. If you have, considering he is arguably the world's, leading clinical expert on cannabis and stating that, the reduction in THC and REM sleep is non-significant. So, I think we can kind of just, leave it at that like, the reduction isn't significant. It decreases nightmares. So, clearly the benefits there outweigh the cons.
100%. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like the spiritual component of dreams and sleeping? Like if you were to smoke weed every single night, and then you're missing that dream state, every single night. Do you think there's like something spiritual is lacking and mystical is lacking? Because there's a lot to be said about dreams. I mean, I've learned a lot about this since I did this ayahuasca ceremony in Peru, just like this dream state almost, where obviously there's a fine line where it can be terrifying and it becomes a nightmare. But I think generally what comes along with a positive frame of mind is good dreams, right? I mean, when you try and make some sense of them, piece them together, whatever that you can come up with to kind of fit into your reality. But do you have any opinion on that? Is that just I mean, I'm not sure if you can quantify that, but the mystical spiritual component of dream state.
So I don't like about like when you're actually, dreaming.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about like the therapeutic benefits of the, what happens when you have like a mystical dream
Mm-hmm.
or, a spiritual dream. That's something that like I haven't really like researched that much. But at the same time, I think that if you're someone who, is using THC all the time and you're missing dreams, well, that's sort of, self-awareness on your behalf that maybe
Sure.
you need to listen to. It's
Yep.
like, hey, like something keeps coming up that like I'm missing dreams. So like maybe I should do something so that, I don't have this feeling that just keeps coming up again. Maybe I should, reduce my THC use for, a few nights and see what happens.
Yep.
And then, maybe that feeling won't come back up again. So, that's how I would, approach the, when we're talking about just like regular dreaming. Now, if you're talking about, a mystical state, if you're using, a psychedelic drug, then, that's kind of a different conversation and a different question.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I've just, actually in the last 6 months or so, I've really cut back on my cannabis use. I did, sober October, and then, before I did this ayahuasca ceremony, I fasted, did this dieta for 3 weeks where I, cut out virtually everything, including sex, and then another week after that. So there was a lot of, sacrifices there. But what I realized, even before I did this ayahuasca ceremony, probably the last couple of times I ate mushrooms, was just how I think once you use the tool enough to get what you need out of it, you don't need it as much, obviously, right? That's the whole idea, right? And, I found myself kind of, say overusing it probably, you know what I mean? I love it, you know what I mean? It enhances my day. I get energy out of it, but, just kind of started to misuse it. And I think when I realized this when I fasted from it, felt, and just kind of like started feeling things I hadn't felt in a while. You know what I mean? Like the dreams, like the first 3 nights, like very vivid dreams. You know what I mean? And I love that and I appreciated that. So there's a few things. So basically my point is that I've tailored, and restructured my cannabis use. I'll say a little bit more mindfully, even though I was actually using it with intention, but probably just a little bit too often with intention, and then not getting some of the the reward out of appreciation of a dream state. Because I mean, I still, like I said, I sleep like a log. I sleep like so well, and I feel rested, but there's something about that dream state that I need to tap into, and the only way to tap into it is without THC. You know what I mean? And that's like from my personal experience. So I appreciate your insight on that, because it is one of those things that you have to be aware and in tune with your body, and then know when to cut back or whatnot, because it's a valuable tool. But just like anything else, it can be misused. But since these last couple psychedelic experiences, I've just really used it really significantly less, and it's and I appreciate it more. You know what I mean? I think when I do consume, I think I just appreciate the medicine even more. So you can get carried away. Not that I'm a big vape guy, but you can be around people and whatnot in situations with vape pens, and it's easy to just rip on the vape pen 10 times in an hour. And you just get in these routines that aren't are not serving you, long term. So I think it's just bringing awareness back into it, and then adjusting as needed. Because I think if you find that sweet spot with cannabis, it's an amazing tool.
You need to use cannabis consciously, right? Like if you I've made videos on this before and posted them, where like if you have no idea how much cannabis you're using or what type of cannabis you're using, or how you're using it, you're using it improperly, and it's really just like an impulse thing.
Right.
It's like, oh, I feel this sensation, I need cannabis. Well, I don't know. Like maybe that's not the best approach overall.
Right. Sure.
And if you're using really high THC cannabis, and you're one of these people who says that like you don't even get high anymore.
Right.
Well, that's a sign. Maybe you should cut back on that.
Yeah.
You want to be conscious of how much you're using. The people who do best with cannabis, if you ask them, what type of cannabis do you use or how much you're using, they'll say to you, yeah, I take about 20 milligrams of CBD in the morning. I might take another 20 milligrams or 30 milligrams before I work out. And then before I go to bed, I'll have 3 or 4 hits on my vape pen, and then maybe 10 milligrams of THC, something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Right? You have a plan. Yeah.
And then that person, they know exactly what they're putting into the body. They have realistic expectations about what to expect after they take it, and they know how to use it properly.
Yep.
Whereas if someone's just like, oh, I use like 2-3 grams a day, whatever, smoke a few joints here, smoke a few joints there, might rip a bong hit,
right?
Might eat edible. It's like, okay, like you're like, there's no cohesiveness there. Like you're not, there's no awareness there. Like you're really not, trying to get better. Basically, all you're saying is just cannabis is awesome, and whenever something goes bad, I just use it.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
Which is like not the way that you want to use it. You want to use it to enhance your life. You don't want to use it as a crutch, like you said. So that's the biggest thing I think for cannabis users is that just be conscious and aware of how much you're using, and be aware of how you're responding to it. Because if you're not aware of how you're responding to it, you're never going to make the right adjustments for yourself.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And the one thing I've learned, and it took probably years to figure out, because there was obviously no manual with this in high school and in my early 20s, but how much less is more is so real when you talk about cannabis. You know what I mean? Especially THC. It's amazing, because I think traditionally we always associate just cannabis with a certain level of high, right? I mean, it's just like, okay, cannabis, and you have to be this high, and you have to be belly up on your couch or whatever, the stigma is around it. But, like the fact that you can get these amazing benefits by such a small amount of THC, you know what I mean? And then obviously CBD too in the combination of, but, and I think that's where most people kind of miss the mark is that they overconsume, like not just like multiple times a day, but like in one sitting, in one dose, they overdose, and then they either induce, the paranoia, and
Yeah.
they induce anxiety when the whole idea is to calm the nervous system and remove or de-stress, remove the anxiety. So it's very easy to do, especially to your point there, when you're just ripping it all day, or what I mean, you just think, I'm just gonna go take a dab. Well, how big of a dab, It's like, because that dab is generally going to put you over the edge, and then
Yeah.
you're sacrificing the medicine for productivity. And
Yeah.
the idea is to use the medicine and get energy and feel better to get work accomplished, or live your life, or do some mindful exercise or whatever it is to get better, right?
Yeah.
So it's amazing how fine of a line there is. You can cross over that line, and then you've essentially abused the substance now, if you want to call it that.
And like, I don't really have any like data to like back this up. This is just something that I try to do with my patients. But I tell a lot of my patients stuff to try to use more than like 30 milligrams of THC a day.
Hmm.
But some people are going to need more, and some people might need more only for a short term.
Right.
Some people might just need 100 milligrams, in a day. They had really bad day, or something serious is going on, where like they're injured. Maybe they do need that much, but for the most part, I try and keep people's tolerance down as much as I can.
Yep.
And one of the ways I try and do that is I try and keep people around about 30 milligrams a day. But of course,
That's interesting.
everyone's completely, everyone's body's different. Everyone metabolizes it different.
Right.
And it is based upon uh, your body weight, quite a bit. So some people will require more, some people will require less. But you should try it once you hit a certain number, and you don't have to pick up my number 30. But once you pick a certain number, you should try and think like, okay, like I'm kind of getting up here now. Like
Right.
what, like when am I going to stop? Am I
Yeah.
just going to keep adding?
No kidding, right? Yeah, no, that's interesting. I haven't heard a rough number like that, but it makes a lot of sense. And you're talking about mainly ingestible of 30
Yeah,
milligrams, yeah,
yeah,
throughout the day.
yeah,
Yeah, no, for sure. Because
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I know how powerful 30 is at once, but even spread out, I mean, it can sustain
yeah.
a full. I can sustain a full day if you're doing 5 to 10 milligrams at once, and you're spacing it out. And I wanted to ask you before we move, shift gears and to talk about diet and stuff like that, like GI health and what you know about cannabis and GI health, because I don't have any data to support this, but just how it makes me feel. How obviously helps remove nausea in cancer patients, and people that have stomach issues, but the way it helps my GI, especially when I ingest it. I do a CBD tincture and stuff, and just how it just makes my stomach feel so good that obviously the food mood, the whole gut brain connection, I just feel like on fire from it. Can you elaborate on it must be just anti-inflammatory or whatnot component of it? Can you elaborate on the GI health and the relation to cannabis, whether it's even smoked? I mean, ingested and smoked,
Yeah,
I feel like it
sure.
helps a ton.
So I mean, it's great, topic to touch on, the gut microbiota. So we know that the bacteria in our gut, doesn't just affect our stomach. We know that it's it has it affects us in different ways. So one of the ways is actually our immune system.
Hmm.
So about 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So if we want to stay away from being cold, you want to have a strong immune system, then you want to have good gut health. And then the other thing that just mentioned too is that it has been linked to mental health as well.
Right.
So improving your gut health may in fact improve your overall mental health. And then coming back to your question, so with regards to CBD, and again, this is something that I'd want to check on again, but the mechanisms of action largely are going to be from the anti-inflammatory effect, like you said before, and then also to a lot of people suffer from IBS, so inflammatory bowel syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
and that is generally induced by stress. So when you use CBD, if you reduce your overall stress, you reduce your overall anxiety, then in fact that may help regulate your gut. If
Yeah.
you're someone who has IBS, right? So you take away their anxiety, we take away their stress, their gut health, goes back to normal. They don't have diarrhea anymore. So, a couple different ways that I think CBD is working there. I think that it probably is acting on the brain for some people, causing that reduction in stress, and that's probably why they're having normal bowel movements versus having IBS or symptoms of IBS. And then again, we know that CBD is a potent anti-inflammatory, so decreasing inflammation in the gut is also going to help.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The stress management. I mean, stress affects every part of our body, every part of our being. So, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. But thanks for clarifying on that, and then blending into the GI health. Just the importance of diet. I mean, it's one of those things that everybody knows the answer there, but the struggles, the discipline, and the daily behaviors, the choices. So maybe talk about your specific diet and what you think is an overall honest, achievable diet for the common man, and then maybe touch on the amount of work required to be in shape or healthy or well. You know what I mean? The whole how much effort do I need to put in physical labor? How many hours in the gym versus how much focus should I have on diet as the primary focus, and tools that you've learned, energy hacks along the way with your diet.
Okay, sure. So, with regards to diet, like you said, right, like it's incredibly important. If you're someone who's struggling with mental health, like literally it can help you as much as medication it has for many people before. So, really happy that we're talking about this today. So, the diet that I tend to follow, just answer that question first, is I have been following a low carb or ketogenic diet for quite some time now. So, I basically, I'll just tell you exactly what I eat in the run of a day. So, generally when I get up in the morning, I don't eat breakfast. So I'll do, I wouldn't say I do intermittent fasting 7 days a week. I probably do it about 5 days a week, but about 5 days a week, I don't have anything in the morning besides black coffee. And then what I'll put in my coffee, so this is a little bit of a cheat, is I put MCT oil powder in my
Okay.
coffee.
Hmm.
The straight up oil kind of doesn't work with my digestive system,
Oh,
but for
really?
whatever
Okay.
reason, the powder does. The powder is perfect.
Okay.
So generally speaking, I don't have anything in the morning, up until at least about 12:30 or 1 o'clock. And then I usually, stop eating the night before, somewhere between 8 to 10. So, I'm not always 16 hours, sometimes between 14 to 16 hours of a fast generally.
Nice.
And when I break the fast, one thing that I absolutely love is eggs. So as you have 4 eggs every day, they have been shown, in studies actually and surprisingly to a lot of people, it can actually improve your cholesterol. Because so we'll just, touch on that just for, a quick second, because I'm sure there's some people's eyebrows raised about eating four,
Right.
four eggs a day. Um, so they have shown that there's two different types of LDL. So LDL is the bad cholesterol, we call it, and HDL, we call that the good cholesterol. Even though they actually stand for high density lipoprotein and low density lipoprotein, so they're actually carriers of cholesterol. They're not actually it's not actually cholesterol itself. But just for the simplicity of this conversation, let's just kind of call HDL good and LDL bad. So LDL can have big, large particles, or it can have small, dense particles. So the small, dense particles we believe are very atherogenic, and those are the ones that can cause heart disease. Whereas the big, fluffy particles seem to be more benign. So when we eat eggs, we can actually get a decrease in the dense particle size and an increase in the benign fluffy particle size. And eggs actually can also increase HDL, so your good cholesterol as well. So, that being said, some people do have certain genetic things where when they eat a lot of cholesterol, they tend to absorb it. So if you are thinking of switching your diet over to something like I'm talking about, like a low carb ketogenic diet, getting some blood work before and after is always a smart move. But I just want to explain why I do
Sure.
eat 4 eggs a day, because I'm sure that some people might have some questions about it. And sometimes I'll put salsa on it, sometimes I'll put avocado on it. So you can always
Change it up.
switch it up and do different things to it. Sometimes I use cheese as well. So that's generally the first meal that I have in the day. And then after that in the afternoon, I don't eat too much. Then what I do buy for like a cheat is I have these like 100% cocoa chocolates that I have,
Okay.
and like if I need something in the day, I'll snack on a few of those. Sometimes I'll have one of these things called like a Susie's Good Fat bar, or like some type of like keto protein bar. But that's kind of more rare. And then generally speaking, so I don't work out in the morning. Generally, I work out after work.
Yep.
So then before work, or sorry, before I work out, I usually have some type of caffeine free like pre workout to help me out, get me going. And then during the workout, I often do drink branched chain amino acids. And then after the workout, that's when I come home and I'll usually have a shake. So I used to do like a green shake in the morning and then like another post workout shake. But I just found that, why not just kind of combine them, make life a little bit easier.
Right.
So what I've been doing is after the workouts, I'll put like, celery, cucumber, zucchini, whatever I can really find, some veggies in there. Then I'll put some protein powder in there. And then I'll put, like talking about gut health, either some kimchi, some sauerkraut, something like that.
Yep.
And then sometimes some olive oil as well. So that's usually my post workout shake. And then that's kind of when I get into my big meal of the day. So I'll eat either a ton of vegetables and a ton of meat. Sometimes like tonight, for example, like you can spice things up a bit. So like I found these like keto hamburger buns. So like tonight, for example, like I had keto hamburger buns. It was cheese. It was even like some like chipotle lime mayonnaise. It was keto.
Yeah.
And so you can definitely still make it so that it tastes like regular food, or almost like a McDonald's hamburger if you
Right.
want.
Right.
But generally, that's how I do things. I have my eggs. I have a little bit of snacking in between, not too much. Then I have a big shake, and then I have a big meal. After that in the nighttime, I might snack on some nuts or something like that. But I generally consume like most of my calories in that kind of big meal after I work out. So that's what like works for me.
Yeah.
It might not work for everybody, but that's the way that's what works for me. But just in general, like if you're getting started and you don't know where to start, like the best place to start is just calories in, calories out.
Mm-hmm.
Like start there. Then once you can kind of get a hold of that and master that, then you can maybe get into evening out your macronutrients a bit. So if you're got the calories in, calories out thing down, but you're eating 10% protein and 10% fat and 80% carb, you're still unlikely to gain any muscle mass, and you could still even gain some fat. So what you'd want to do in that situation is you want to start skewing the macronutrients. So maybe bump up the protein a little bit, bump up the healthy fats, and decrease the carbohydrates. But and I know there's so many diets out there
Right.
now.
It's
It's like
confusing for sure.
ketogenic diet, low carb diet, plant
Yep.
based diet, carnivore diet. I mean,
Yep.
it's so crazy. So that's why I'm just trying to start off by saying something very simple, just saying like start off with calories in and calories out, and then work your way from there into just eating nutrient dense calories,
Yep.
right? So that there's more nutrients in spinach and kale that there is in sugar,
Right.
right? And that you're going to be a lot more full from that. So what you really want to do is eat not a low calorie diet where you're at the point where you have no energy, but you want to eat a U calorie diet where you're matching how many calories you should be getting, or if you're someone who wants to lose weight, of course you want to go a little bit lower. If you want someone who's gained weight, which is probably not for many people, you want to go a little bit higher. But get your calories straight first, and then work on your macronutrients, and then just try and keep it simple.
Yeah.
Because if you try and get too complicated, you're probably going to fall off your diet, and that's the worst thing. Because and I really want to stress this point before we move on to the next question, is the best diet is the one that you can follow.
Right.
If you can only follow a diet for 3 days and then you fall off of it, and then you try it again and you fall off it again for 3 days, that's not the diet for you. Like,
Yeah.
you need to find a diet that you can sustain 365 days a year. Of course, there's always going to be days you're off, but you get my point. You
Right.
want to find a diet you can sustain 365 days a year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a challenge too. A lot of these people, they want to go on a diet. You know what I mean? It's like they look at it as like a temporary thing. I mean, it should be like something consistent and long term, right? We're trying to find a sweet spot with our eating, or we can, it may necessarily not be a Greek god, but you know what I mean? Being that, that leaner, state, and still enjoy some foods that give up everything, especially in the Western world here, where it's we've been trained to eat a certain way almost, and it's now it's the challenge is like, oh, do I have to kind of go like all in on this other side now, and never have a cheat food ever again? But I think it's like once you get to understanding how much nutrient rich foods you actually need, and how much actual work, meaning exercise, you need to put in to have whatever you decide to be a healthy body, then you can have your cheats, because now you're doing what you're doing. You're fasting or intermittent fasting. So you're giving your GI a break, and you're doing all these things that you can compromise that cheat, now and then. Obviously it's
Absolutely.
It's one of those things that, cheats you can argue what a cheat is, but, just being selective of, when you're eating foods out of your primary, food selections. And I wanted to ask you, since you're doing this low carbohydrate diet, I don't remember you mentioning fruit. Do you eat any fruit?
So right now, I actually have, that's a good question. I have added a little bit of fruit back in. Generally, I've gone through a long periods where I haven't.
Okay.
But the benefits to blueberries are pretty powerful.
Sure.
Like, they
Yeah.
have a lot of cognitive benefits, a ton of antioxidants. A lot of people know that. And so, when do I eat them? I would eat them right after I work out,
Okay.
because that's when your insulin sensitivity is highest.
Okay.
So, you can definitely still also to stay in ketosis, but and eat a handful of berries a day. Like, I just want to do it at the right time.
Okay.
And then also too, Riley, like, I didn't go over the exercise part of the question that you
Oh yeah.
asked earlier. You want me to touch on
Please
that?
do.
So I think that you need to do something for your strength. You need to do something for your cardiovascular system. You need to do something for mobility. They're all critically important, and they all need to be, in my opinion, very well balanced. And you're going to enjoy, one of them, or maybe two of them, more than the other one. For myself, I just feel so good when I do cardio. So, even though I don't really like doing it that much,
Who does?
I do it because it makes me feel really, really good when I do it. I get a huge kind of euphoric high off of it. Mobility, I think, is something that you probably do a lot more than me, because they're super big into the yoga, and that's maybe my Achilles heel a little bit, because the strength training, I do that generally 3 days a week, sometimes 4 days a week, and then I do MMA, generally 3 to 4 days a week. Lately, I've been doing it a little bit less, unfortunately. And then the mobility, I just kind of try and throw in my workouts at the beginning, and at the end. But sometimes, I admit that I skip it, or I don't do as much as I should.
Yeah.
So that's and then that's something that I definitely want to work on. Like, maybe I should be doing one less strength training workout and one more yoga session or something like that. And the other thing too is, like, as you get older, you probably will have to skew your training more towards mobility
Yep.
and less towards cardio and strength training. And just on that note too, I think it's important to talk about like lengths, that the length of workouts.
Right.
Like when I do a strength training workout, like generally it's about 35 to 45 minutes, probably more in the 40 to 45 minutes, but it's never more than that. I don't, you don't need to be in the gym lifting weights for 2 or 3 hours at a
Right.
time. Also too, you know, I basically haven't gone till failure on anything in years. I don't think that you need to go to failure when you're training in the gym. I think that's completely unnecessary. Rack it. Probably even one rep before you think you can do one more. I think that way you're not shocking your nervous system as much.
Yeah.
So you're probably not cranking on your adrenals. Probably able to sleep better. So I think, and also the prevention of injury. So I think that's important. And with the cardio, like, so I just do it very short and intense. I did do some martial arts when I was younger, but I only really got into MMA about 5 years ago. But when I do that now, I mean, a lot of times we'll do like 9 3-minute rounds. There's a minute break between each round, so I mean, the whole thing is 35 minutes, right? So it doesn't have to take up your whole day, and you don't have to completely exhaust yourself.
Right.
And you know what? You can completely exhaust yourself if you really want to in
Oh
30
yeah.
minutes if you work hard. So, I think it's important for people to know that you don't have to. It doesn't have to take up your whole day, and you should try and balance your workouts a little bit with strength training and with cardiovascular conditioning and with mobility. Keep those three things in mind when you're doing your workouts. Make sure that you're well balanced overall.
Yeah, for sure. How old are you, Mike?
35.
35. Yeah, I'm turning 38 next month, and I just my previous life, I spent so much time lifting weights and doing the cardio and doing the MMA and stuff like that, and just taxing the joints and the body. So when I retired, I could just like. In my life, in my experience, it was like, okay, well, I don't have to fight anybody anymore. It was like almost like, okay, well now I can like heal and like do all these things that I wanted to do, but I really didn't spend any time on, like you said, like the mobility. I mean, I barely stretched, you know what I mean? If you told me to do yoga when I was playing, I would have laughed at you. And like, that's just how different I think now. But like my main form of exercise now is yoga, honestly. And all those things you mentioned, I feel like I get out of my yoga practice. I get strength. It's not weight strength training, but it's a humbling type of strength. You know what I mean? That you talk about things I wish I would have done, from the balance component when I was playing, you know what I mean? And it would have helped me out as a hockey player. But, the cardio, I feel like it's not, going 9 rounds, in the ring or, sitting on a treadmill for 20 minutes, but there is an element of cardio, you know what I mean? You're moving with breath, your heart rate is elevated, and I don't know the science of where that needs to be to be qualified cardio, but I feel like it's, for me it feels like it's enough. And then the mobility, and I think that's where I appreciate the most, is just like being more functional, actually moving the way I think I was supposed to, and not just being such a stiff hockey player. Because again, I just kind of figured it out on my own. I think I've tried every diet on the planet, eaten every protein powder on the planet, trained every which way. But all with the right intentions, but just with real proper guidance, and so to your point on the the amount of the work you got to put into it, I think this is the challenge for a lot of people, because and you're so in tune with your body and your energy levels that you understand what you can do, where you're not robbing energy from tomorrow to use it today. You know what I mean? Where now you're kind of like behind the 8 ball of energy, and you're chasing the dragon with stimulants and all that stuff, which I think a lot of people do. I think they overtax themselves, you know what I mean? Whether they're, marathon runners and, or whatnot, they just stress their bodies out. They feel like they have to go to CrossFit, 5 days a week to stay in shape or to be well. And I think they overstress their bodies. And I think part of it is like the chicken and the egg, is like the anxiety induces that need to do that. But they're not in tune enough with their energy levels, where they overtax, they overstress, And then it's this vicious cycle of like, you're chasing this dragon and you feel like you need to do it. And eventually it's like you hear these super in shape people like having heart attacks and,
Well,
negative things happening with
what
the, you know?
what it is, I think, is like they're telling themselves a story
Right.
that if you don't make it, to this gym a certain times a week, then you're pathetic, or you're
Right.
whatever the blank is. So that's what they've created in their head. Like that's a story that like they tell themselves. So if they don't make it, they're going to get into this like real negative thinking spin,
Yep.
right? Which is obviously very, very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not having like a healthy relationship with your body and your
Right.
mind and gym. What you want to do is like the gym should be making your mind healthier. It should
Right.
be making you feel better. Every time you go to the gym, you should actually feel better than when you left. Right. So, I think that, if someone has, a relationship with the workouts like that, they really need to, reconsider, what they're doing, and maybe do something differently,
Right.
because you want to do something that you enjoy. If you do something you enjoy, then you're more likely to keep doing it. It's more likely to be a habit. But if you do something that you don't enjoy, and it's not that rewarding, then it's not going to be a habit.
For sure.
There's a guy, James Clear, wrote a book recently called Atomic Habits. And, that was actually part of his philosophy in that book. Like you do the things that reward you.
Right.
So you want to do something that you actually enjoy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I 100% agree with that. I think people get caught up in this like addictive, it's almost like an addicted state, right? So recently, a colleague of mine who I worked with the Flyers back in the day, he's an older guy. He recently had a heart attack, and he was, in the AA program, 20 years ago. I think he's been, 18 years sober or something like that. But I don't think he ever got to the root cause of his, or the root cause of his addiction, where he just transferred his alcohol addiction to running. And he would literally run on the treadmill for 3 hours, at a time, and he would, big body, like barely get through it, just sweating everywhere. And it's like, it's hard not to notice and question, like, what is too much now? You know what I mean? And like, again, to my point earlier, is like how much is actually needed to fulfill that, quote unquote, piece of your life, which is exercise. And now it's like you're again, it's stress induced, right? It's coming from somewhere, anxiety and whatnot, that you just feel like it's an expression, right? Exercise is an expression, whether you're doing, yoga, or you're doing, lifting weights, you're, just doing body weight stuff. You're expressing somehow. So I think people can get caught up in this pattern of, like, to your point earlier, was, this story you're telling of thinking that you have to do this to, because you have to do this to keep your mind away from the alcohol, or keep your mind off this or whatnot, but not being in tune enough to know that you're now actually harming your body. You're not actually inducing wellness. You know what I mean? There's that balance. And some people do that because they're addicted to alcohol and whatnot, and other people do it because they're addicted to food, where they actually try to, outwork their bad diets. Where now
Yeah,
the stress is just
and
like converted to their workouts, and it's interesting. They get caught up in this pattern, and it's how do you coach them out of that? There's a lot of self-love issues, there's probably, self-respect issues, whatnot, right? Along in there.
yeah, you can get addicted to being busy and being productive, and then which some people do nowadays. And then if you have a still moment where you're not doing something, you feel anxious, you
Yep.
feel something's wrong, because we generally seek what's familiar to us.
Yep.
Now, what's familiar to us isn't necessarily what's best for us,
Sure.
but we always gravitate towards what's really most familiar to us. So I think you have to be careful when if you find yourself just keep gravitating towards something that's familiar to you, because you're going there because it's familiar to you, it feels comfortable. But just because it feels comfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's best for you. And you mentioned earlier someone running 3 hours a day, like on the treadmill, like to have to have that type of requirement, just to feel just to feel okay every day, is a lot of stress on someone,
Right.
and I don't think it brings any stillness to anybody, or any peace, or any, real long lasting
No,
content. Right. So, what really, that person is afraid of is they're afraid of being alone, or they're afraid of being still, you can't be afraid of being alone or being still. That's when
that's it.
you'll conquer, a lot of your demons, and that's a state that a lot of people avoid these days. But
Yep.
it's one that everyone, should try to conquer, because once you get better at it, you're going to gain a lot of momentum and a lot of different qualities, and a lot of different areas of your life.
100%. I'm glad you brought up fear because it transitions to this next topic before I let you go here, and it's psychedelics. And you've been pretty vocal about the use of certain psychedelics for mental health and whatnot. You mentioned fear, so we'll start with that. And you mentioned CBD earlier, helping with the fear response. I know from personal experience how these things can help with fear, facing your fear. I think it's a great tool to face fear. What is your experience, or what do you know about how psychedelics help with that? From what you've learned.
Sure. So, I think that psychedelics are making, a huge comeback right now. So, the fact that cannabis is legal is amazing, but, I think that's really opened the door, and opened, people's eyes for potential other medicines as well. So we have, psilocybin, which is, I believe, legal in Denver. We have, or in the whole state of Colorado, I believe. And then we have psilocybin that's also legal in Oakland, and I think they're decriminalizing all,
All plant
psychedelic
entheogens there
drugs.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, so, very very excited to hear, more about these medicines, coming out, and hopefully, I can prescribe them one day, like I can prescribe cannabis
Sure.
now. So, that's what I'm really really hoping for. In terms of, what these medicines can do for people, I know that there's been, trials with MDMA and assisted psychotherapy that's shown that, patients have had some pretty significant improvement. So again, I think that what it is, they are removing some of the fear from these people. A lot of people who have PTSD too, they're very angry people, right? So, what is the antidote to anger? The antidote to anger is love.
That's right.
So, it only makes sense that, MDMA would be effective for these people,
Sure.
because if again, just referring to studies, when it's been given in a correct dose, in the correct environment, with the trained psychotherapist there, what happens is that people are able to feel love again,
Yeah.
and they don't feel that anger. And because they're able to feel love, it changes their whole emotional system.
Yeah.
It changes how they regulate their emotions overall, and it gives them a sense of hope. It gives them a sense of hope. And if you don't have hope, you know that you're in a really bad place, a really dark place. That's when people get really depressed and suicidal, is when they don't have hope, when they don't feel love. And there's this book, I've actually just read it recently, called The Five Love Languages, and it talks about, having, a full love tank or an empty love tank. And, we have a deep, deep need to feel loved.
Sure.
Every single human
Yeah.
absolutely needs to feel loved.
Right.
If a human does not feel loved, they're going to be very angry, they're going to be very bitter, they're going to be mean, and they're not going to want to give out love to other people.
Yep.
Right. And when they see other people who do feel loved, who are in love, that's going to make them angry, because it only reminds them of the love that they don't have. So, I do think that it's very important for people who have PTSD, and people who have, any type of anger issues, or if even if you're just someone who doesn't feel loved, it's something that needs to be addressed, and something that needs to be done. That is something that people need to do something about it immediately, because if you don't, it's just going to get worse. And if it gets worse, you can go down a real a bad and dark path.
Yep.
So because of that, I do feel that MDMA can be extremely helpful and therapeutic for a lot of patients who have anger issues with PTSD. And I hope that in the future it's a drug that I'll be able to prescribe to my patients.
Yeah, beautiful. Are you seeing that at all in your research with psilocybin? Because my own personal experience, I do find that state of like love and peace, where it's an energy, but it's like almost a self-reflection. Because I think a lot of the anger component is not so much that you don't feel love from other people. That could be part of it, but I think it's the lack of self-love. And I think psychedelics, I mean, even the ayahuasca certainly instilled that into me, where it was like, if you don't love yourself, you really can't truly love. And the universal language of the planet is love. It's like the energy is like it's so powerful, but it's hard to break through and be happy if there's no self-love, right? So I think the psychedelic for me always shows me that. And then you answered my question of why it helps with the fear, and it's exactly that, is because it shows you love. And I've had that experience every time.
And yeah, and you are right on the self-love part, because like if you love yourself, you will do things that are good for yourself.
That's it.
Like if you love your wife, you love your kids, love your girlfriend, what do you do for them? You do good things for them.
Yep.
You want to see them succeed. You want to see them get better. So because of that, you're going to do things out of love to hopefully make their life better.
Yep.
Right. Whereas like if you're someone who is very angry and is very bitter, and you don't feel any of that love, then you're not going to want to put that energy out there for other people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if you don't put that energy out there, and if you don't put that love out there, you're not going to get that love back.
Right. The law of karma, right? Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about it in multiple times. I've heard it, but in his book Supernatural, if you read it or not, but I love him. He's awesome. But he talks about people always looking outside of themselves for a feeling, right, or for love in this situation. To talk about love, so like we're looking outside of ourselves for love, right? So it's like, okay, well, if I get that girl, or if I get that guy, then I will feel, the love that I need. I mean, the love that I've been missing the whole time. And he makes the point where it's like, if you're not in tune with your own self and loving yourself before you find that person, they're not going to be able to fulfill that void of love. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some sort of, connection to yourself, and that work has to be kind of initiated. Otherwise it's going to be like, well, we're just going to grow in separate directions, and you're going to end up breaking up and whatnot, because you never really truly loved yourself. So how can you really be in love with that person? You know what I mean?
And you're not going to, I mean, if you're someone who loves yourself, then that means that you're going to do a lot of good for yourself.
Yep.
Because you love yourself. And just like we talked about, like, you love someone else, you do good for them. You love yourself, you do good for yourself. You take care of yourself. You don't talk negatively about yourself. You don't have negative, not never negative thoughts or about yourself. But like these are things that you do because you love yourself. You know that it's good for you. And because of that, like if you're doing things that are good for you, then you're going to be putting out love out there. And then also too, other people are going to see that, and they're going to want to be around that. If you see someone, taking care of themselves, that's very, very motivating. You're going to want to be around that person. That's going to attract you to that person.
Sure.
But if you see someone, who's just like a slob, and they don't take care of themselves, they don't put any effort into themselves, you're not going to want to be around that energy. And that person's not putting, love out to the world at that point. They're just being angry and bitter. So, if you only, it sounds so like corny, but like, you have to have self-love in order to put love out there. And the only way to get love is to give love.
Right.
So it all starts with self-love.
It does. Oh, I know. It's so true. Yeah, it's amazing. It's a hard lesson to teach, right? Because I mean, I can speak for myself in my life. I think I was trained to kind of think if you loved yourself, it was arrogance. What psychedelics have helped me with is, and it's cliche now, the term of ego death, but I think it's helped me break down these programs in my mind where it's like self-love isn't selfish or arrogant. You know what I mean? It's confidence. It's exactly that. It's self-love. It's showing in yourself that you care about not just the physical body, but the spirit and everything about it. Right. And you're going to do whatever you can to sustain life and be well and help people around you. And I think, for me, thinking that way for years, and then being able to kind of break out of the shackles of that thinking to like, geez, I'm like, I can be confident with saying I love myself without thinking that I'm sounding arrogant and egotistical, because it's coming out of a place of love, and it's a humble energy, but we don't talk
Absolutely.
about this stuff enough, I don't think. And it's just, we have these
I don't
angry.
I don't think we do either. I don't, and I think that, in some ways, like, when people say like, oh, like you love yourself, like in that way, like a lot of times people in that instance, like they're just trying to be like righteous, and they're just
Right.
trying to say that like their like values or their philosophy is life is like better than like your way of life. But
Sure.
really, in reality, like if you love yourself, you're going to have good energy, and you're going to be able to put that energy out into the world, and you're going to be able to help other people.
Yeah,
So like the more you love yourself, the more you're going to be able to help other people,
that's it.
right? If you take care of yourself, you love yourself, you can take care of other people, you're going to motivate other people, because just by example, like just by loving yourself and taking care of yourself, people are going to recognize that, and they're going to be like, man, this guy's really taking care of himself. He seems like he's really happy. He's doing really well. Like, I think this is probably like the way to kind of do things.
Right.
So, it's not selfish at all.
No,
In fact, it's unselfish not to love yourself,
that's it.
because if you don't love yourself, you're not going to be helping anybody else.
That's it.
But if you love yourself, then you're saying to yourself, yeah, I love myself. I'm going to put energy, effort into myself because I deserve it. And with this energy that I have, and with all these things that I accomplish, I'm going to be able to help so many more people, and I'm going to pass that on, and I'm going to build momentum, and I'm going to create other leaders. I'm going to create other people who are even better than me. So that's like the attitude that you want to have.
Yeah, no kidding. Well said. It is all attitude and mindset, right? It's perspective, because I think most people play victim, and they're not in control of their destiny. They're not able to manifest their dreams, because they've had some adversity and bounces in the road. But pretty interesting stuff. I don't think it's talked about nearly enough, honestly, because when we talk about love, it's just such a subjective umbrella word. But when you dig right into it, it starts with self-love, like you said, and there's no other way you can actually help as many people as you'd like to, and be a spiritual leader in your community and whatnot, if there's no self-love. People, it's an energy, right? I mean, people
Yeah.
observe it, and they're drawn towards it, like you said earlier. They're attracted to that energy, and they want to know where it's coming from and what you're doing to get that energy. So I think this conversation needs to become more mainstream, because it's talking about emotions. I guess it kind of falls in the play of the whole emotional intelligence thing, just being in tune with how certain things make you feel. And generally that always comes back to that component of self-love. So well, I appreciate you being on here, man. I know it's well past 9, and do you have anything else you want to talk about, anything else you want to mention as a last thought?
Just that I hope all your listeners really enjoyed this, and if you enjoyed what I said today, please follow me online. I'm at Dr. Mike Hart on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and my website is mikehartmd.com.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate you coming on, spending some time and sharing your insights and wisdom. It's powerful stuff, and I'd love to do this again. I'm going to be in Toronto in the next couple of weeks on the 17th, so maybe I don't know. You're in London, I guess, a couple hours, but I'll be there for a couple of days. Maybe we can link up one of these days when I'm up there, a couple of times a month or so. So
Perfect. Yeah, I'll look at my schedule, and hopefully we can make it happen.
sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate it, and thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Well, thank you, Riley, and thank you to all your listeners.
Appreciate it, brother. I'll talk to you soon.